Okay, so this is the Daf Yomi for March 15, 2025. This would have been Shabbat. Again, I'm behind, so here we go. We ended, so I'm going to go back to the end of 87 because it's in the middle of a statement. It says, marks on garments, the dispute regarding such a prohibition is with regard to the issue that is subject to the dispute between Rabbi Yonatan ben AvaTorahJudaism and the rabbis, as it is taught in a Braita, that Rabbi Yonatan ben AvaTorahJudaism says from where is it derived, and then now we're in 88. With regard to a case where there is a spread of leprosy in garments that culminates with the garments being completely covered with leprous marks, that the garment is pure. Tahara. So as it is with regard to leprosy of a person. Karahat and Gabachat are stated with regard to a leprosy of a person, Leviticus 13:42. In the sense of baldness on the back of one's head and forehead. And Karahat and Gabachat are stated with regard to leprosy of garments, Leviticus 13:55. In the sense of the newer and older sections of the garment, just as there with regard to leprosy of a person, if the leprosy spread to his entire body, he is pure. So too here with regard to leprosy of garments, if the leprosy spread to the entire garment, it is pure. The rabbis disagree and hold that even if the leprosy spreads, the garment remains impure. Therefore, if one touches the garment throughout, which is the leprosy spread, and enters the temple, according to the rabbis, he is liable to receive karet. While according to Rabbi Yonatan ben AvaTorahJudaism, he is not liable. Divrei, matters quote, Divrei, matters of whatever. These are the valuations and the dedications and the consecrations. The Gemara elaborates, in the case of valuations, the dispute concerning such prohibition is with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. So when it says the rabbis, it means the majority. As we learned in a Braita, in the case of one who valuates a child less than 1 month old, for whom the Torah does not specify a value. Rabbi Meir says he gives the monetary value of the child, as it is apparent that his intent was to give a donation, not a valuation. And the rabbis say he did not say anything. If the money is not consecrated, and one betrothed a woman with it, she is not betrothed, and one who engages in intercourse with her is liable to receive karet. In the case of dedications, the dispute concerning such a prohibition is with regard to the issue that is subject to the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and the rabbis. As we learned in a Mishnah, so Arakin 28b, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, dedications dedicated without specification of their purpose are designated for the temple maintenance, as it is stated, every dedicated item is most sacred unto the Lord. Leviticus 27:28. And the rabbis say dedications dedicated without specification of their purpose are designated for the priest, as it is stated, so that's the majority opinion, as it is stated with regard to one who consecrated a field and did not redeem it. Quote, as a field dedicated to the priest shall be its possession. Leviticus 27:21. If so, why must the verse state, quote, every dedicated item is most sacred unto the Lord? This is to teach that dedication takes effect on offerings of the most sacred order and offerings of lesser sanctity. According to the rabbis, the property is not consecrated, and if a woman is betrothed with that property, the betrothal takes effect, and one who engages in intercourse with her is liable to receive karet, because she's a married woman. According to the Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, the property is consecrated, and she is not liable. But we follow the majority. So, in the case of consecrations, the dispute concerning such prohibition is with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and the rabbis. As it is taught in a Braita, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, even a small fork that is consecrated property requires a court consisting of 10 people in order to redeem it. The rabbis say a court of 3 judges is sufficient. According to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, if it is redeemed before a court of 3, the property remains consecrated. According to the rabbis, the property is not consecrated. And if a woman is betrothed with that property, the betrothal takes effect. And one who engages in intercourse with her is liable to receive karet. According to the Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the property is consecrated and he is not liable. Revot, disputes. This is the giving of the bitter waters to a sota to drink. We have a running joke in my family that Hebrew is not connected to English, and just like you have the word soda, like a soda drink, because D and T are interchanged in a lot of languages, like linguistically, so you have bottle and bottle, Like we say bottle, but it's spelled with a T because, the sound kind of devolves into a D. So you have sota is, it's the word to drink is, it has the s and t sounds in it. So that's just the root of it. And then we have the word in English, soda. So Hebrew and English have no connection. Disputes. So revote. This is the giving of the bitter waters to a soda to drink, and the heifer whose neck is broken, and the purification of a leper. In the case of giving the bitter waters to a soda to drink, the dispute concerning such a prohibition is with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, as we learned in the Braita, Sota 2a, with regard to one who issues a warning to his wife not to seclude herself with a particular man. Rabbi Eliezer says he issues a warning to her based on the presence of two witnesses. Only then is the warning effective. And the husband gives her the bitter waters based on the testimony of one witness who saw the seclusion, or even based on his own testimony. Rabbi Yehoshua says he both issues a warning to her based on the presence of two witnesses and gives her the bitter waters to drink based on the testimony of two witnesses. If the seclusion took place in the presence of one witness, according to Rabbi Eliezer, she is a sota and not entitled to receive payment of her marriage contract. According to Rabbi Yehoshua, she is not a sota and she is entitled to receive payment of her marriage contract. The difference is whether the money of her marriage contract is hers. According to Rabbi Eliezer, if she gave that money to another who betrothed the woman with it, it is a betrothal with stolen property, and the woman is not betrothed. According to Rabbi Yehoshua, the betrothal would not take effect. According to Rabbi Yehoshua, the betrothal would not take effect. In the case of the heifer whose neck is broken, the dispute concerning such prohibition is with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, as we learned in a Mishnah, Sota 45b. From where on the body of the murder victim would they measure the distance to determine which city is closest? And this seems like so crazy that it would be down to the minute location on the body of where it is. But, I mean, this is how precise the Torah attempts to be, because there's so many things you can gain from this, and there's so many repercussions to these types of derivations. Rabbi Eliezer says from his navel. Rabbi Akiva says from his nose. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, from the place where he became a slain person, which is from his neck. According to all of these Tanaim, if the corpse was measured from a place on the body other than the place prescribed, the heifer is not consecrated for its purpose. According to Rabbi Akiva, if the measurement was taken from his navel, the heifer is not consecrated for its purpose, while according to Rabbi Eliezer, it is consecrated for its purpose. This has clear ramifications with regard to a situation in which one attempts to betroth a woman with that heifer. So they're just giving you a simple relation here, but also the idea is like Rabbi Akiva is saying the navel, and that's like where you connect to your mother at birth. Like that's like the central point where the child is nourished and grows from. Whereas the other rabbis the other Tana is talking about like from his neck, like he's killed right here, right? So your wind, your breath leaves you from this area, so they measure from here. So different, these are different thought processes in this whole exercise. So in the case of the purification of a leper, the dispute concerning such prohibition is with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis, meaning the majority. As we learned in the Mishnah, Nagaim 14:9. So if you remember that word, that means like leprosy. So if a leper does not have a thumb or a big toe or right ear upon which the Torah says that blood and oil must be placed as part of the purification process for the leper, he has no possibility of purification forever. Rabbi Eliezer says the priest places the blood and oil for him on its place, that is, where those body parts would have been if they were intact, and he fulfills his obligation. So Rabbi Shimon says the priest places the blood and oil on his left thumb rather than the right, left thumb, toe, and ear, and he fulfills his obligation. Both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon maintain that it is possible to purify such a leper who would then not be liable to be punished with karet if he were to enter the temple. The rabbis who maintain that such a leper has no possibility of purification hold that if he enters the temple, he is liable to be punished with karet. And that actually goes back to a few things like, so like if you're left-handed, your left side is actually considered your right side for a right person, and like I think according to the Zohar. So there's different ideas at play here because there's also ideas that your body takes the form of the spiritual component of you, and just because your body is not there, that doesn't mean that your spiritual component is not present. Like, just because you lose a limb doesn't mean that your spiritual body loses, like, in essence, the filling of that limb. So there's these ideas that are at play here. So in your gates, this quote, in your gates, this is the gleanings, forgotten sheaves, and produce in the corner of the field, so peah. In the case of gleanings, the dispute concerning such prohibition is, as we learned in a Mishnah, peah 6:5, 2 stalks that were not cut with the sheaves and are then found in a field by a poor person are gleanings and belong to the poor person. 3 stalks are not gleanings, and the owner of the field can take them if he chooses. In the case of forgotten sheaves, the same Mishnah teaches that if he forgot 2 sheaves, they are forgotten sheaves and belong to the poor, whereas 3 or more bundles are not forgotten sheaves and belong to the owner of the field. With regard to all of them, Beit Shammai say if there are 3, it belongs to the poor person, and if there are 4, it belongs to the owner. According to Beit Hillel, if a poor person took 3 stalks or sheaves, they do not belong to him, and if he betrothed the woman with them, the betrothal does not take effect. According to Beit Shammai, she is betrothed. In the case of peah, the dispute, meaning the corner of a field, the dispute concerning such prohibition is with regard to the issue that is the subject of the dispute between Rabbi Yishmael and the rabbis. As we learned in a Baraita, the mitzvah of peah is to designate it from the standing grain still growing from the ground. And if he did not designate it from the standing grain, but reaped the entire field, he designates a portion from the sheaves as peah. If he did not designate it from the sheaves, he designates it from the pile, where one places the kernels after threshing, before he smooths the pile, at which point the produce is considered grain from which one is obligated to take terumot and tithes. If he already smoothed the pile before designated the peah, he ties the grain in the pile and then gives the peah to the poor. If he ground the kernels into flour, he no longer designates peah. So if you've gone that far, you're not even going to, fulfill that. So in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, they said, one designates peah even from the dough. So if a poor person takes peah from the dough and betroths a woman with the dough, according to the rabbis, the majority, the betrothal does not take effect, while according to Rabbi Yishmael, she is betrothed. The Mishnah teaches there are 3 courts. There were 3 courts there in Jerusalem. The Mishnah then details the procedure followed when a rebellious elder appeared before these courts. Rav Kahana says, if the rebellious elder says his ruling on the basis of the tradition he received from his teacher, and the members of the court say their ruling on the basis of the tradition they received from their teachers, the rebellious elder is not executed because there is a legitimate basis for his ruling. If the rebellious elder says, this is the correct understanding in my eyes, and does not claim that his ruling is based on tradition, and the members of the court say, this is the correct understanding in our eyes, he is not executed. And all the more so, if he says his ruling on the basis of the tradition, and the members of the court say, this is the correct understanding in our eyes, he is not executed. He is not executed unless he flouts tradition on the basis of his understanding and says, this is the correct understanding in my eyes. And the members of the court say their ruling on the basis of the tradition. Know that this is so, as Akavya ben Mahalalel was not executed, despite the fact that he ruled contrary to the consensus ruling of his contemporaries, because he based his ruling on a tradition that he received. And Rabbi Elazar says, even if the rebellious elder says his ruling on the basis of the tradition, and the members of the court say that this is the correct understanding in our eyes, he is executed, so that discord will not proliferate among Israel to ensure that there will be a standard halakhic ruling. And if you say, for what reason was Akavya ben Mahalalel not executed, it is due to the fact that he did not issue his ruling as practical halakha. He merely claimed that his understanding was correct in theory, which is always permitted. We learned in the Mishnah that the rebellious elder says, this is what I interpreted, and that is what my colleagues interpreted. This is what I taught, and that is what my colleagues taught. The Gemara asked, what is it not, including a case where he says his ruling on the basis of tradition and the members of the court say this is the correct understanding in our eyes? The Gemara rejects this. No. The case is to a case where he says this is the correct understanding in my eyes and the members of the court say they're ruling on the basis of the tradition. Tashema, come in here, proof from that which Rabbi Yoshia says. There are 3 matters that Zerah, one of the residents of Jerusalem, said to me. The first is that in the case of a husband who, after warning his wife not to enter into seclusion with a certain man, retracted his warning is retracted. If she enters into seclusion with that man, she is not rendered forbidden to her husband. The second matter is that in the case of a stubborn and rebellious son whose father and mother sought to forgive him for his gluttonous and drunken conduct and decided not to bring him to court, they can forgive him. The third is that in the case of a rebellious elder whom his court sought to forgive for his deviation from their ruling, they can forgive him. And when I came to my colleagues in the South with regard to two of the cases, they agreed with me. But with regard to a rebellious elder, they did not agree with me, so that discord would not proliferate in Israel. This supports the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, and is a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Rav Kahana. It is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Yoshi said initially, discord would not proliferate among Israel. Rather, the court of 71 judges would sit in the chamber of hewn stone, and there were two additional courts, each consisting of 23 judges. One would convene at the entrance to the Temple Mount, and one would convene at the entrance to the temple courtyard, and all the other courts consisting of 23 judges would convene in all cities inhabited by the Jewish people. And if you're wondering like what the structure is, Tractate Midah is actually goes over the entire structure of the court and of the temple complex and what all those rooms and everything were. So the matter was unclear, and it was necessary to ask and clarify it. Those uncertain of the halacha would ask the court that is in their city. If the members of the court heard a clear halakhic ruling with regard to that matter, they said it to them, and if not, they would come to a court that is adjacent to their city. If the members of the court heard a clear halakhic ruling with regard to that matter, they said it to them, and if not, they would come to the court at the entrance to the Temple Mount. If the members of the court heard a clear halakhic ruling with regard to that matter, they said it to them, and if not, they would come to the court at the entrance to the temple courtyard. And the elder whose ruling deviated from the ruling of his colleague says, "This is what I interpreted, and that is what my colleagues interpreted. This is what I taught, and that is what my colleagues taught." If the members of the court heard a clear halakhic ruling with regard to that matter, they said it to them. And if not, these judges and those judges would come to the chamber of hewn stone, where the Sanhedrin would be convened from the time that the daily morning offering is sacrificed until the time that the daily afternoon offering is sacrificed. And on Shabbat and festivals, when the court is not in session, the members of the court would sit at the rampart. When a question was asked before them, if the members of the court heard a clear halakhic ruling with regard to that matter, they would say it to them, and if not, they would stand for a vote on the matter. And if the judges who deemed the item in question ritually impure outnumbered those who deemed it pure, the court would deem the item impure. If the judges who deemed the item in question ritually pure outnumbered those who deemed it impure, the court would deem the item pure. From the time that the disciples of Shammai and Hillel grew in number, and they were disciples who did not attend to their masters to a requisite degree, the dispute proliferated among the Jewish people that the Torah became like two Torahs. The disparate systems of halakha developed, and there was no longer a halakha consensus with regard to every matter. And I want to point out, Hillel was older than Shammai, and Hillel, he actually came at a time when, contrary to Christianity, where there was like killing of babies and stuff like that. Okay, so there was a point in history when that event happened, but it was earlier in history. This is why Christianity and Judaism do not line up with historical context, and we have no way of really reconciling this stuff. So there was a period when the rabbinic authorities were pushed out by, I believe it was Herod. I could be wrong, one of the first Herod. I could be wrong about that. But there was an event where the rabbis were pushed out, killed, murdered, and stuff like that. And he kept like one rabbi, and that rabbi actually convinced him for his atonement to renovate the temple. So that's why the temple ended up getting renovated and beautified and everything like that. But anyway, at that point in history, there was a bottleneck where there weren't any teachers in Torah in Jerusalem. So Hillel came, I believe it was from Babylonia, the academies of Babylon, and he, or at least that area of the world, there's probably a more specific town that he came from, and he came to teach Torah, and he revived Torah. So there are different times in history when there were bottlenecks of tradition. So with Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, there were just only a few people left that didn't turn the Baalim. That was one bottleneck. Hillel was another bottleneck. So Torah passes through Hillel. That's another reason why we follow Hillel and not Shammai. I believe it's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So at the time when the Romans were persecuting everyone, they were killing anybody who was doing like smicha or anything like that, trying to pass on smicha. There was a bottleneck there in history where the amount of Torah knowledge embodied in people came to a minimum, and there were just different bottlenecks in history, and this is just the Hillel and Shammai period is when they actually lived, not like their school maintained the names, but when they actually lived, that was another bottleneck in history. So Torah came back, and it was focused through Hillel. So here we go. The Breita continues its discussion on the workings of the Sanhedrin. From there, the Sanhedrin writes and dispatches the following statement to all places: anyone who is wise and humble in the minds of people are at ease with him shall be a judge in his city. And that actually is reflective of who Hillel was. If he is successful in his city, from there they promote him to the court at the entrance to the Temple Mount. If there is a vacant seat on the court, and from there they promote him to the court at the entrance to the temple courtyard, and from there to the court in the chamber of hewn stone, which is the Sanhedrin, right? The highest court. Apropos the appointment of judges, the Gemara relates that they sent the following statement from there. That is Eretz Yisrael. Who is the one destined to receive a place in the world to come? It is one who is modest and humble, who bows and enters, bows and exits, and who studies Torah regularly, who does not take credit for himself. The sages cast their eyes on Rav Ulai bar Abba, as they perceived him as the embodiment of all these characteristics. So the Mishnah teaches, if the rebellious elder returned to his city and he taught in the matter that he was teaching previously, he's exempt from punishment, unless he instructs others to act on the basis of his ruling. The sages taught he is not liable unless he acts in accordance with his ruling, or he instructs others and they act in accordance with his ruling. The Gemara challenges, granted, if he instructs others and they act in accordance with his ruling, there is a novel element in the fact that he is liable to be executed, as initially, before he deemed a rebellious elder, he is not liable to receive the death penalty for instructing others to perform the transgression. And now he is to receive the death penalty. But if he acts in accordance with his ruling, initially, before he was deemed a rebellious elder, he is also liable to receive the death penalty for performing that action. The Gemara clarifies the difficulty. This works out well in a case where he ruled with regard to forbidden fat and blood, as initially he would not have been liable to receive the death penalty. Rather, he would have been liable to receive karet, and now he is liable to receive the death penalty. But in a case where he ruled with regard to a transgression for which one is liable to receive a court-imposed death penalty, initially he is also liable to receive the death penalty. The Gemara explains, there is a novel element even in the case where he acts in accordance with his ruling, as initially, before he is deemed a rebellious elder, he requires forewarning in order to be executed. Now he does not require forewarning in order to be executed. The Gemara asked, if the rebellious elder's ruling was with regard to one who instigates others to engage in idol worship, who does not require forewarning, what is there to say? Because if in the case of idol worship, you do not need to warn somebody ahead of time. Okay, both before and after he is deemed a rebellious elder, he is executed without forewarning. The Gemara answers, initially, before the rebellious elder ruled that instigating others to engage in idol worship is permitted, if after he instigated others, he stated a reason why he thought that it is permitted, we accept his explanation from him and exempt him. Now, after he issued the divergent ruling, if he stated a reason, we do not accept the explanation from him, since he already indicated that he holds that instigating others to engage in idol worship, incitement is permitted, and that is the reason he engaged in instigation. Now we're back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, with regard to rulings of the rebellious elder, the Mishnah states, there is a greater stringency with regard to traditional rabbinic interpretations of the Torah than with regard to matters of Torah. If one states there is no mitzvah to don tefillin, and his intention is in order to have others violate matters of Torah, he is exempt from punishment as a rebellious elder. One who disputes matters written explicitly in the Torah is not considered an elder and a Torah scholar, and therefore does not assume the status of a rebellious elder. There you go. If, however, he disputed a matter based on a rabbinic tradition, he stated that there should be 5 compartments in the tefillin, of the tefillin shel rosh, in order to add an extra compartment to the 4 established according to traditional rabbinic interpretations of the Torah, he is liable. Okay? because it doesn't say in the Torah that there's supposed to be 5 compartments in the tefillin shel rosh. It's a rabbinic understanding, and therefore, if he says that there's 5, he's going against the rabbinic tradition and not a Torah tradition. So he's considered an elder because he's still following the Torah, right? But it's saying that if he's trying to tell you something that's a direct violation of the written Torah, he's not considered an elder, so he doesn't even fall under this category. So now we're back to the Gemara. The Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar says that Rabbi Oshaya says, one is liable only for issuing a ruling with regard to a matter whose essence, whose basic obligation is from matters of Torah and whose explanation is from traditional rabbinic interpretations of the Torah, with which includes the possibility to add to it. And if one added to it, one compromises his fulfillment of the mitzvah and does not satisfy his obligation. And we have only the mitzvah to don phylacteries that meets those criteria. Or tefillin, I'm sorry. And Rabbi Oshaya's statement is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says a rebellious elder is liable only for a matter whose essence is from the matters of Torah and whose explanation is from traditional rabbinic interpretations of Torah. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the mitzvah of lulav and the other species that one takes on the festival of Sukkot, whose essence is from matters of Torah and whose explanation is from traditional rabbinic interpretations, that establish the identity and the number of the 4 species enumerated in the Torah, with which includes the possibility to add other species to it, and if one added to it, one compromises his fulfillment of the mitzvah and does not satisfy his obligation. The Gemara rejects this possibility. It is not the case as with regard to the mitzvah of lulav. What do we hold? If we hold that fundamentally a lulav does not require binding, meaning binding them together, of the species together in order to fulfill the mitzvah, then adding an additional species is inconsequential, as these species with which he fulfills the mitzvah stand alone, and that additional species stands alone. It is as though he were holding the species of the mitzvah and an additional unrelated item that does not affect the fulfillment of the mitzvah. And if we hold that a lulav requires binding the 4 species together in order to fulfill the mitzvah, fulfillment of the mitzvah is already compromised from the outset. The rebellious elder is liable only when the object of the mitzvah was as it should be, and the addition compromised the object and disqualifies it. In this case, the object was never as it should be. Okay, the Gemara asked, but isn't there the mitzvah of ritual fringes, or tzitzit, whose essence is from matters of Torah and whose explanation is from traditional rabbinic interpretations, that establish the number of fringes enumerated in the Torah and the number of threads in each fringe, and which includes the possibility to add fringes or threads to it. And if one adds to it, one compromises his fulfillment of the mitzvah and does not satisfy his obligation. The Gemara rejects this possibility. That is not the case as with regard to ritual fringe or tzitzit. What do we hold? We hold that the upper knot is not mandated by Torah law, and one fulfills his obligation by placing the threads on the corner of the garment. These threads with which he fulfills the mitzvah are independent, and that additional thread is independent and does not compromise fulfillment of the mitzvah. The additional string is not considered as joined to the required strings. And if we hold, and then it goes into 89, but I'll just continue this, that the upper knot is maintained by Torah law, then fulfillment of the mitzvah is already compromised from the outset when the additional string is tied together with the other strings. So that's the beginning of 89, but I want to finish that. So 88. The note here is the upper knot. According to most commentaries, the upper knot is the first knot with which the threads of the tzitzit are tied to the talit prior to the fringe being tied. So whenever it goes through the garment and you tie that first knot. So anyway, that's the end of that. I think it's very, very interesting discussion there. So thank you. Hopefully we get caught up here with these videos. Have a nice day.